Hey guys, on today's episode, we have Josh Dikis with us, our admissions specialist, and we also have his father, Jimmy Dikis. He shares his experience witnessing Josh in active addiction, but also, more importantly, his life in recovery. It's pretty inspiring. Tune in. Welcome to Impacting Recovery Uncensored. I'm your host, Sarah Pritchard. This is a podcast where we dive deep into the real, uncensored truths about addiction, recovery, and everything in between. No sugarcoating and no judgment, just honest conversations that can help lift up the solution. So let's get started. Today, we have some very special guests. We have Mr. Jimmy Dikis. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thanks for having me.
Good. Yes, thank you for coming. And then we have our admissions specialist, Josh Dikis, here again. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. How about you?
Good. Thank y'all so much for coming. And Jimmy is Josh's father. So we just kind of thought it would be important and fun to have your father on and get kind of a father's perspective on things. I think a lot of times, the family's perspective does get lost when the loved one is in active addiction. And so this is going to be really helpful for families. So that's our goal. If y'all are good with that.
I hope so.
Ready to go? Yeah, I think it's going to be really good.
I think it will be.
Different perspective for sure.
Okay, great. Okay, Jimmy, I'll ask you first. What made you open to coming on the podcast in the first place?
That's an easy question to answer. You've gone through everything we've gone through, and we feel blessed to see him where he is now. But you want to give back. You want to help other families. You want to tell other people what it's about. You want to let them know there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Mm-hmm. You want to move forward. And I get asked by so many people because I don't hide Josh's addiction anymore. Mm-hmm. I'm proud to talk about where he is, and I'm proud to mention it to other people. And as I do that, and being here does that, it allows them to reach out to me. Yeah. Because the team, the community, the friends of mine that have stepped up to help Stephanie and I and our whole family, it's just a blessing. And to be able to give back and do this, I feel really lucky that you've asked me to be here.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned you don't have to hide it anymore. Were you hiding it for a time there?
You seem to be embarrassed.
Yeah.
You question what happened. How did this happen? Were we bad parents? What did we fail? What did we do? And there's no blame there. Mm-hmm. There's nothing the parents did wrong.
Right.
There's nothing the wife or son or daughter did wrong.
Yeah.
It's an addiction. It's a disease, and it's got to be addressed. And so.
Yeah, that's so important.
And I'm going to jump in. We were talking about this just a little bit ago, and we actually talk about it periodically and just, when we're on the phone together. But I work with the families, and I literally have that conversation so often. Mm-hmm. And I think it's good for them to hear a family member talk about they once struggled with the being embarrassed piece. I mean, I know addicts ourselves. You could probably attest at some point it went from being embarrassed and ashamed to this whole level of acceptance for us on our end.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And I think the same thing comes true to the families to an extent, especially now in the past 10 years when addiction itself is kind of like a little more widespread.
Yes.
And a little bit less of this, oh my gosh, how could this be?
Right.
To where we are today. It's like, go get some help. Mm-hmm. With a little bit more supportive around the world, in a sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, most or the public kind of talks about and the stigma and that sort of thing. And I do think there's been progress in that, I would assume maybe if you were when you were growing up, if you knew somebody that had something going on, it was probably like nobody talk about this.
Nobody talked about it.
Yeah.
It was hide that person in a closet.
Right.
Take him away from everything.
Yes.
He's a bad person. He's a horrible person. That's so untrue.
Yeah.
That is not the way it should be addressed.
Right. And I'm glad you mentioned.
And sometimes it still is. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the stigma, as y'all said, it still is that way.
Yes.
And it shouldn't be.
Right. And I'm glad you mentioned about how families, or you and Stephanie were like, what did we do wrong as parents? Like, why is this happening? Because I think that is a very common thought. And Josh, like you said, you're talking to families all the time. When I talk to families, they're just they're like, I don't know what I did wrong or what I'm going to do wrong. Am I going to say the wrong thing? And I'm going to make them use. I'm going to make them drink. Yeah. So it's all that pressure. Did you feel that?
Oh, we did, and especially mothers. And you've probably heard me when I've spoken at other places. Moms are so special. You're a mother. You're a special lady. They're so special that they take it even more personal than the fathers.
Yeah.
I grew up in that suck it up buttercup, get through this. You can quit, just throw it down and walk away.
Right.
It's not that way.
Yeah.
It's definitely not.
Yeah. And so I'm curious because you're Josh's father, so you saw everything kind of from the beginning. What was your experience like watching his progression? And how did that look from maybe when he was in high school to, going into college? And then when did you kind of see it was a problem versus like he's young and partying and now this has gone too far?
That's interesting because you think of it in high school and you don't really notice it because you're a parent trying to help your kid and you don't really see it starting then, which is probably when it did.
Yeah.
And then you see it progress into college and, you hear about pre-gaming. What's pre-gaming? Oh, we're gonna go do 4 shots and then we're heading out to the party. And I'm like, maybe that's an issue, Yeah. Maybe that's something we should talk about. But as it progresses, it slowly gets a little out of control.
Mm-hmm.
And you see it as a parent and you're almost scared to say anything. Mm-hmm. You're scared to spur it on. You don't want to cause an argument. You don't want it to be what it looks like it's becoming.
Yeah.
That's the real thing.
Right.
As a parent, you're brought up to, I was always thought when I have kids, it's my responsibility to help them move forward, to take care of them. It's not about Stephanie and I, it's about the children.
Mm-hmm.
We want to get them to a school, get them to college, get them, make sure we help them find their way. And there's a point when that goes away, but you want to do those things and you sometimes miss this part.
Yes.
I hear the word enable all the time. You've enabled your kids and you're doing this and enabling them. And I think what it really is, Sarah and Josh even, it's you love them so much, you're not really enabling them. You're trying to care for them and find a way. And, that love sometimes gets jaded and blinds you and you miss what's laying right out in front of you.
Yeah.
I think that's so true and I tell families all the time, if you're doing something for love, then I'm not going to tell you it's a bad thing or a good thing, but I am going to point out to them at times when maybe they need to step back and kind of look at what that action looks like or that inaction looks like. And sometimes that's showing love as well,
mm-hmm.
right? Taking them and guiding them and explaining it to them. Some situations that I'm sure we'll get into that he had to do the same thing. Like, all right, I am loving my son, but is there a better way to do that? Or is there a different way? And given these circumstances, right? And then another thing he talked about, and you were asking about like the progression of this thing with me.
Wow.
He's pointed out to me, and he had told me once, Josh, I was wondering, your brother and friends are taking, a couple beers as a pregame, and you're over here taking 4 or 5 shots of whiskey. So that was one time he mentioned to me about that. And then he brings this up periodically. We were at a family dinner, and I didn't know any of this happened until years ago. But he was like, you spilt like 5 beers, like 5 drinks. Like, yeah, talking about progression. I'm pretty sure that was a progression.
Yeah, I'm watching him, and it was Mother's Day, actually. We were out with families, and he kept knocking his bottle over, and I'm going, dang, he already had that many beers. And then I think of things that progress, sitting watching TV or a movie, and, he's dozing off in the middle of a sentence. We're having a conversation and just completely out. And I don't mean out coming back. I mean out for 5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And you see these things, and as a parent, you want to take time afterward to sit down and talk about it. And as you do, you realize how good a salesman that an addict is.
Right. Oh, yes.
And they can sell. I mean, good Lord, they're the best salesmen they've ever been. And sadly, they sometimes use your love to get what they need or solve a situation. But the hardest thing I've noticed in my life, and I hope this helps somebody, is you see things happen and you want to point it out and have a conversation or sit down and go, hey, you're falling off the wagon here. And as a parent, you see it, but you go, no, maybe it's not really happening.
Right.
And what happens is somebody else sees it, like his brother.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something we can get into as we continue talking. The effects that it has on a brother, a sister, an uncle, an aunt, a nephew, a niece. And as Josh's recovery has gotten, here we just did 3 years, and it's just such a blessing. You see him becoming a father, a good son again, a good uncle, a good brother. Just the whole thing progresses.
Right.
And you see it, not just him becoming a man, but spiritually becoming a man,
Mm-hmm.
being able to accept the things that happened. That's the blessing of recovery. That's what Impact teaches that's been different from everything else I've seen. When I listened to Adams the first day we went, and Chad, I mean, what two better people to have in your life? How blessed could you be to have Adams and Chad in your life, to where they directed you to have a life?
Right.
They want you to go through recovery. They just don't want you to get sober. They want you to be back on your feet and become a man again and a father and so forth. And, I always like go to a Widespread Panic concert and have fun.
Yeah.
Those things are cool.
Yeah.
It's good to see that.
Yes.
It really is.
Yes. And did you have any experience with like someone else, and you don't have to mention who, but like addiction before? Did you know about recovery at all, and like how it's not just taking away the substances? Because you've obviously seen this huge transformation in Josh's life. And so
Correct.
I'm just curious if you knew anything about this world, because for me, I didn't. And I just thought, like, you take away the drugs and alcohol and I'm still going to be the same person. I'm still, operate in the exact same way. And that wasn't the case, thank goodness.
No, the drugs and alcohol, as he's told me before, and I've listened to people speak, were the solution to help you get through the day. So when you remove it, you got to find out what the new solution is to continue through life. And I think that's happened at Impact and happened through good people. I think the people you surround yourself with, even in my case, not being an addict, but surrounding myself with such good friends. And once you start speaking to them, you realize, well, my brother did, or my dad was that way, or, hey, let me hook you up with this guy named Tim that has done this with his daughter. And, I found other friends that have lost children during all this, and it grows us. That's our community. You guys have a recovery community and an alumni community that help one another. And I found that reaching out to people and accepting what's going on and knowing that addiction is out there and it's everywhere.
Yes.
That if you don't address it and you don't become part of it and you don't have friends helping you, I want people to reach out to me that know me, that has a son, a daughter, a mother, a father. And so I've learned over the time, I've said some things at times that were incorrect. And I've maybe been too tough on somebody that was at an early point of addiction with their son or daughter. And I learned that I might have hurt their feelings in what I said. And Josh has told me, speak from the heart. And even if you do hurt their feelings, at least you've said the right thing.
Right.
I think sometimes I'm a little bit of a smart aleck and I'll throw a jab out there and go, well, you're just doing the same thing you were doing before.
Yeah.
And so when you throw that jab out, it's like, you just shot an arrow in their heart of the person you're trying to help.
Yeah.
Because they're hurting. Parents and spouses and kids are hurting when all this is going on.
Yes. Yes.
So he did have a couple resources he reached out. I remember going into the first treatment when this whole thing was blown wide open, that there were some resources that he used with people that he knew were struggling with addiction or had a family member struggling with addiction, right? And as he's learned through me about, the reality of what's the solution and what's the problem, I think that knowledge, of course, for you and I when we're helping another addict and alcoholic, but I think for him to now be able to have that knowledge is huge when you're talking to a family member, because what are they going to say? I mean, he stopped drinking for 2 months and here we are again.
Yeah.
Like that prepares him to better suit and help comfort another family.
Yes.
I think that's what I try to do on the phones as well.
Yeah, no. And y'all both mentioned some really great points. A couple of things that I want to touch on that y'all talked about. So one, Josh, when, going back to your dad being like, what did we do wrong? Did you think any of that was going through their heads when you were in your active addiction? Like, were you like, it's my parents' fault that I'm doing this?
I would say no. Like, I'm
Yeah.
not going to sit there and be like, oh, if my dad would have done X, Y, Z,
Right.
then I would be just fine.
Yeah.
No, like I didn't really go through my mind. Now, what did happen, right, was when, after, for some reason, I see this very common, not just in myself and other people like addicts and alcoholics, is once we go to treatment, once we go try to get well, and then we're like, well, y'all won't help me to get an apartment or get this car. I need more from y'all. Like, it's your fault that I'm in this stress.
Yeah.
But no, early on, and even then was delusional, but early on, no, not at all. It was nothing in my mind was telling me, had my parents done different, then I wouldn't be this way.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, like, everyone has different experiences, right? Like, there are some people that had a really rough upbringing, and they're like, I know for a fact, because I've talked to people, they're like, if my parents didn't do this, then I wouldn't have done that. But there are people that are in the same situation, and they're not drug addicts and alcoholics, you know?
Yeah,
exactly.
And so I think it's just so important to point out those differences in our upbringing or our thought process or our situations that happen in our life, because like you mentioned, it's a disease of addiction. This is not something that is behavior modification. And then when you mentioned the enabling and how, they're like, don't enable. Well, most times the families don't know they're enabling.
Yeah.
Like, what is that? Like you said, we're just trying to love him. We love him. We're trying to help.
And, I grew up fixing everything.
Oh, yeah.
So as a dad, I want to fix it. I can help him. I got this. I know what I'm doing. I learned real quick. I didn't have any clue what I was doing, but at least I was doing something.
Right.
And I think of so many people sit back that beat themselves up. If we just could get away from that and just continue trying to help them move forward. I think of Josh's recovery, and I think how it's made me better.
Yeah.
And how it's made me better is watching how he approaches situations. We both had pretty hot tempers, which, when you're young, it's so cool that you have a hot temper. It gets you nowhere in life. It's really a horrible thing to have.
Couple black eyes on
all
you get.
But we've both found, and spiritually he's helped. He and his new wife, they're much more spiritual now than before, and he is. And it's a blessing to see how he treats his children and how he reacts and how angry. He'll call me up and go, we'll be discussing something that used to be venting. And now he goes, I blew that one, Dad. I go, and it's helped me do that with my wife or even with him or my other son or my brother. I go, wow, I blew that one. I let my temperament and my opinion overwhelm what the situation really is.
Which can go into what you were touching on about this whole perception of enabling and things is it doesn't matter really what a family member says or doesn't say, right? This is what I try to tell them when I'm on the phone with them. What matters is your decision, wherever it came from, is from love. And then if you learn a little bit about your potential enabling, then you make decisions that you can sleep at night with.
Right.
Right. Like, I'm not going to tell, going back on it, if I was to tell Dad, if you would have done this, this, and this, it might have sped up my recovery. It might have, it might not have. But at the end of the day, you got to make some decisions that you can put your head on that pillow at night and maintain whatever
Very
that new
so.
baseline or barrier, or I'm sorry, the boundary is that you set.
Right.
That's the important piece, I think.
That was difficult. I remember when Josh finished at that, 35, 40 days, and he was getting ready to go to phase 2. And he wasn't ready to go to phase 2. He was wanting to come home. And I was like, Josh, you're 30-something years old. You're fixing to man up. It's time for you to handle this. If you don't go to phase 2, you're not coming here. Yeah. You're going to have to go figure out how this is going to work. And what did you after we talked about that, you went back to Chad and said, I got this idea of how we're going to work phase 2. He already had it laid out how he was going to handle this. And, and that's the other interesting thing is he's grown and gotten better in his recovery. I recall sitting down and we were discussing budgets. We were discussing how you move forward in life, where you're going, the things that all get lost in addiction.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and the coolest things are the holidays. When we got ready to go to Thanksgiving, he goes, man, I'm excited to go. And he goes, because I'm present. And I remember last year, I wasn't worried. You know, those are so cool.
Yeah.
You know, Christmas Day with the family. He goes, I remember all that. I look forward to it now.
That's
and,
amazing.
It's really cool. It's a blessing.
Yeah. And so going back a little bit, I guess right before y'all went to Impact or saw Impact for the first time, was there a particular moment when you were like, this is done, we're not doing this anymore? And I want to hear from your side what that looked like, and then your side what that looked like.
I'm sure they're interesting views. So we had an instance on a weekend where he was going to pick his son up, and he fell off the wagon pretty intently.
Mm-hmm.
And one of his friend's mothers, I think this is in his 30s, and she brings him to the house, and you're pretty tore up. I still have the video of me kind of almost carrying him in, you know, and you're worried to death. You're calling everybody you know to find out, do we need to take him to the hospital? What do we need to do? And that kind of was an eye-opening experience for Stephanie and I.
Mm-hmm.
If you ever want to lose a bunch of weight.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, we didn't eat for like a week.
Yeah.
You know, we were just a hot mess.
Yes.
So Josh and I come up with this contract. We're gonna self-treat at home. We have an agreement that you know, if I catch you using, you're going to have 15 minutes to get whatever you want, get it in your car, and get out of my house. And so he signs it. We had a long drive. We're both crying, talking about it, and we get it all squared away. And it took, about a year?
Yes, I don't know.
Yeah.
I really don't know. Personally,
I would say,
know. It felt like 3 days you know, for me.
I would say the first 6 months it went well.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there wasn't a lot of concern. And then you start seeing things and you start wondering. And
what kind of things did you start seeing that were red flags?
Dozing off in a chair. You know, I'm on the way home and showing up 30 minutes later when he's 10 minutes away. And, you know, the little things, all the things you see before.
Right.
You know, not going to a meeting. Parents ask me all the time, or friends, how do you know things aren't going well? I said, well, when he quits going to meetings, when he quits talking to his sponsor, when he quits sponsoring people, when he quits doing his morning and evening. And I've noticed that you know, you watch that early on intently. And to this day, when he's with me or staying at my house or we're somewhere, he'll step outside and do his evening stuff. And in the morning, he'll get up, get a cup of coffee, and go in another room. And it's you know, he's moving forward. You know, he's recovering. You know, he's taking care of himself.
Yeah.
So
going back, something he's told me before about when he knew things were different, like after the contract was written, was when my patience wasn't there.
Yes.
Right. Like I was seeing this therapist and things were good. Like you probably have experience seeing a therapist. Things were good for a couple months.
Yeah.
But my patience, he always points out my patience. And then it really made my mom timid to approach me in certain situations.
Right.
So that's something that I think.
Yes. You're almost scared to say something.
Right.
Because you know what the result is.
Mm-hmm.
So we did the self-treating for a while, and that kind of came to a head. That's how we discovered Impact.
Mm-hmm.
We brought him downstairs. We met a lady that was a therapist, and we'd been talking to her about things, and we brought him downstairs. This is Christmas week. I think you went on Impact New Year's Day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like you said, a great New Year's resolution.
Yeah.
We kind of tricked him that we needed to discuss some things. And so she introduces herself, and within 30 seconds, she goes, Jimmy, do you have something to tell Josh? And I'm like, man, I wasn't expecting that. I thought we were going to at least, lead up to something.
Right.
She just threw the line out and set the hook, and I went. And, we did that, and that started our conversation that you have 15 minutes to get your stuff in the car. And I'll never forget, he walked down the steps, and he said, so Dad, if I don't go to treatment, can I come over and have dinner with you and Mom or watch a game or whatever? And this was the hard part.
Yeah.
This is what's hard when I tell parents or anybody. I said, no, son, you couldn't. And I'm in the background, Stephanie's falling apart. I'm starting to cry. He's
I'm
crying.
I'm going to cry. I can't imagine.
It gives me chills now to think that I'm telling my son, no, you can't come to my house ever again.
Yeah.
Unless you go to treatment. And that's when he goes, well, let's drive out to Impact.
No. You said, all right, right now we're just going to go out there. You don't have to tell me anything.
That's right.
We're going to go. And I said, okay. Yeah, I didn't
Yeah.
really have another option. And I was
Right.
thinking, well, that'll give me time to look at apartments.
Yeah.
Anyways, didn't mean to interrupt. Sorry.
No, that's right, because he was in the car. I'm sure he was looking at apartments thinking, how much is this going to cost?
Yeah.
We get to Impact, and of course, we listened to Adam's talk, and Jacob was there in Colby. And Jacob was Josh's mentor, which is a perfect mentor for Josh.
Mm-hmm.
For hard-headed people like us, we need somebody that just lays it right out in front of us.
Yeah.
And so we went, we came back, and that's when he decided to go to treatment. And we were going to go on Saturday. The only mistake we made is Adams told us we didn't have to be there till 3. So from our house to there was about 3.5 hours.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we stopped everywhere. He had something to do at every place,
Yeah.
So, yeah. And we know what was going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's how we moved toward Impact, and it was a blessing that we found y'all.
And so when he
sure.
got there, how did you feel? Were you relieved, hopeful?
Whew. You're at wit's end, and he's upstairs while Stephanie and I are downstairs, knowing we're fixing to leave in a little bit. And all I hear are drawers opening. I go upstairs and he's laid his clothes out, and I go, dude, you're going to treatment. You're not, you're not going to a golf tournament. They said you don't need to dress up. You don't need your coat, your tie. And he's going through everything. And I'm sure what was really happening, he was trying to see what was there and what wasn't there, that he could take with him. So the relief when you get there as a parent or a spouse or whatever, you at least know for 30 or 40 days he's getting some treatment, he's getting some help, and you want to know what's going to. Your worry is when we get to day 30 or 40 or whenever he's being released, we need to go to stage 2. Mm-hmm. We need to go to sober living. We need to go to. We know we need to do that. We know we need him to do that. And I say we because it's all of us. It's not. He's not alone in this. It's affecting everybody.
Yes.
It's affecting his relationship with his brother, my relationship with his brother, his brother's wife. I mean, it goes, it doesn't miss a person.
Yes.
It affects, nephews, nieces,
Mm-hmm.
my brother, his wife, his children, my sister. The whole thing just stair steps down. It's a hell of a roller coaster ride.
It is. And I'm glad you mentioned that also, because our book talks about we're like tornadoes roaring through the lives of others. And you think about the tornado as like the eye of the tornado, everything's destroyed, right? But the winds, there's still damage from the winds of the tornado and the storm. And so it's like, just like you're talking about the nieces and nephews and maybe the people that didn't directly get impacted, like you didn't directly lie to your niece or something like that, but they're still affected. They're still harmed by it. And it's just total ripple effect. And kind of like you mentioned earlier, on the flip side of that is once somebody recovers, it's a ripple effect with all the same people in your life in a positive way.
Because I tell people when I'm speaking to them or talking about it, your family wants you back in their life. They still love you. They don't want to just throw you away. They would love for you to come back. And when you're going through treatment and you're going through recovery and you're getting better, that's when they want you back in their life. And that's when you need them. Mm-hmm. You need them. And families need to know that. They need you. Josh needs us when he comes out of treatment. Yeah. You're every and we need him. It helps us heal too.
Right.
It's interesting. It's interesting.
And it is because it's like you said, everyone's affected, but also it's one unit. So what is so amazing about your journey is that you've done your own healing work too with this, because a lot of times families are like, they're the one with the problem. They're going to get help. And once they do that, great. And I'm going to just live my life how I've been living it. And probably it's because
that won't work.
No, I know.
I mean, it's a great thought. Okay, Mr. Josh, you go, you're better now, rock and roll. But, to change the course a little bit too, once more of your friends and family find out and you're not embarrassed by it, the prayers, the thoughts, the caring, the comfort from other people, and then comfort from other people who's maybe have lost someone to addiction, or maybe they have someone in addiction or in recovery or in treatment. I mean, it becomes, and even the people that have nobody in any of it, never had it touch them, they're all praying for you and helping you and hugging you and making it better,
right.
Everybody wants to see you better and healthy after you've gone through this. All your friends want to see you. They miss you.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to totally change it.
Oh,
but
no, I
those
love that.
people are so important to me and to Stephanie, all those friends that have helped us. I mean, there's so many, man. I mean, I can't even name the love that's out there. I mean, it's really impressive. God is so good. And people that don't realize how good God is need to pick their Bibles back up.
Yeah.
I think that it's important. You said something about like he got some relief himself and did some work on himself. That they worked with the family counselor, even a little before I went and got well this time. But I think there's also a unique piece to when they are working on themselves, like family members are doing some work for themselves. It allows for I don't know how to say this, the stumbles that I have in early recovery. And I'm not talking about relapsing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about like a conversation we were having with budget, and he was helping me, and I pull money out of my 401k and he's going to manage it for me. And he tells me, now listen, I don't want you to be calling me, or going out here buying $200 pair of shoes.
Right.
We got to work on this budget. And this is the real life situation you're in. And I'll never forget, one day we're on the phone and we're just talking, and he says, so how's your finances? And like in the bottom of my heart, I want to tell him like, not good. I just bought $200 worth of
You got
shoes.
your new shoes on.
Yeah. Right out of treatment. But what happened is through the program, I called him shortly back and I said, man, look, finances are horrible actually. And here's why. I'm sure he was a little bit bubbling inside after he just, helped me get to where I was on the financial burden that it potentially placed on him and things. But what he was capable of doing was still being loving and empathetic and also assertive in, well, look, man, I kind of anticipated this would happen. Thank you for telling me.
Yeah.
But let's not do this again.
Right.
Like enough's enough. You learned. Let's learn.
Yeah.
The coolest thing is now if he's telling me something, I'll go, dude, you're sugarcoating this. You're trying to make me feel good about this. I don't want to feel good. I need to know the truth.
Right.
And so now we've cut through all the sugarcoating.
Yeah.
Now when I ask him something, I get the real answer. I'd say 99% of the time. There's still a curve every now and then.
And to get back on what you were talking about, and this is probably just, my side, my belief of this, but like, I don't know if he didn't do some of the work on himself, would those stumbles have looked the same? Would it have maybe taken longer for me to make an adjustment? Would there have been more animosity? I don't know, but I can just say, and I think you could agree, is when the family does some work while the addict and alcoholic is doing some work, you come together and it's a little bit, it begins a healthy baseline for what the family dynamic is going to look like.
Yeah.
Having Stephanie as the spiritual leader in our house, and I can mask that however you want to. She definitely leads us spiritually. And her strength and belief in God really helped me become a better person as well. Just there's a little daily reading we do. It's called, is it the Lose or the Lows?
I don't know. Mom's going to
She knows the correct way to say it. But anyway, they send a reading out every day. And I can tell you through his treatment, it was going to him while he was at Impact. And I would read one and go, dude, were they in your room last night when you called me and told me this? I mean, did they know this is what we were talking about last night? How does God know that this one little 3-minute reading we do was so reflective of what was going on in mine and Stephanie's life and his life and many people around us? And I've shared that with probably over 100 people, and they all love it.
Yeah,
that's
amazing.
It's cool. It's just God is so good in this.
Yeah, and I just love how this is such a message of hope to people out there, because clearly if somebody has to go get help outside of real life, then it's not good. And so it's so scary when you're in it. And even you kind of, both of y'all touching on this of like, before this process, having hard time having uncomfortable conversations, where now it's like you guys are like, we're just gonna, we're gonna be direct. We're gonna just be open and honest, because that is hard. And it's funny that you mentioned about like him you mentioned with the money, and you're like, okay, Dad, like, and I do that with my 4-year-old. I'm like, I'm like, okay, just tell me the truth. You're not going to get in trouble. Like, did you take the gum?
Yeah.
And he's like, I did. I'm like, okay, you're not in trouble, but let's not do that again. And I'm like, it's like the addict and alcoholic. We're like little toddlers when we are in early sobriety because we're learning how to live life.
Exactly.
And a lot of us, I think there's a hard transition into that sometimes because you're like, whoa, like there's just so much happening at once. So
I love one time he goes, it costs that much? He goes, yeah, I never even paid attention to it.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's really neat that you were willing to help him through that and kind of this role of like father, son in a new light showed up. So I think that I don't know. I like that story. That's cool.
It's been pretty cool. There's been a lot of fun things.
Yeah.
We found a lot of joy in the mistakes.
Yeah.
And we can laugh at them now.
Right.
But he's become a man again.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the whole thing. That's, that you said it's your 4-year-old. Well, when you have a 4-year-old, you're teaching them every year something's getting better. What's cool about where he's come after he got his treatment, his recovery, and doing everything is that, small steps he was taking. He went from a 4-year-old to a 25-year-old, then to a 30-year-old. And those steps were huge.
Right.
And it was easy for him to understand because he's clear-headed. He's seeing it. We would write stuff down and talk about things, and it's been pretty cool.
It was unique. Let me tell you something. This is so great for me to hear him talk about me like this. Not just, it's just like, all right, like makes me feel great. Like there's some validation here. But what I appreciate it the most is, if you remember last time I was in here, I was talking about how I was wondering how my dad couldn't view me as a man.
Yeah.
Right. And then I go through this process, and then to hear him say that is what the process did. Josh didn't do much.
Right.
With God's help, some guidance, and this process, like this journey, and to hear that is like, yeah, it makes me feel good. But in reality, what it is it just shows the strength of this whole journey, this whole process, right?
Yeah.
This whole being recovered looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And boy, I never thought that would be the day.
Yeah.
I really didn't think that was coming.
I know it's this power moving in our lives that we could not have drum up on our own because we would have done it long ago before all the heartache and pain. And so, yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that. And I remember, you talking about one of the times your dad being like, I'm disappointed.
Yeah.
And how much that like upset you.
Yeah.
And even though if the addict or alcoholic is like so mad at the family or whatever, you still want your father's approval. You still want to live up to their expectations or whatever you think a son needs to be. And that just shows the love is there. It shows up in all different ways, like you said, on both sides.
Yeah.
And the love is there. It just gets buried by this.
And then
this
what
chaos.
happens is we have that love and that caring piece inside us as the addict, right? We go out here and we make decisions. We have, our decision making becomes paramount around the drugs over everything else.
Mm-hmm.
And what the family sees is that
Yes.
they kind of lose the piece of the puzzle, the heart of the addict and alcoholic, because it's rarely seen, and I'm not gonna talk about my emotions in the middle of active addiction.
But he talks about them a lot more now than he ever did.
Yeah,
and that's cool.
Yeah,
and so like that's this whole piece to the puzzle of the family side and what they see and what he's vocalized to me before, and to now understand that like and for the addicts and alcoholics out there, like we have that.
Mm-hmm.
And you can still always find it. You just have to recover.
Right. Yes. Well,
if people get anything out of this,
mm-hmm.
the emotional part, I can't tell you how many times he's called me over the last just a year. We won't even go back to 3 years. And he's almost in tears about how lucky he is to be where he's at and to be sober and to be. He called me at Christmas. He was driving home from our house to his house, and he goes, wow, I haven't looked at Christmas lights like this in a long time. I want to go get the kids and go drive around and look at them. And, I'm starting to tear up. He's tearing up. So there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
And if it just helps one person to know that, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. There is an opportunity there for you. everybody goes, it's so hard, but when you get it, it's so easy.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to take away what you go through in detoxing and all that, but it is hard, and it's hard on the family. But to see where he is now, you sit back and you go, wow, it's been 3 years, but man, it was easy. I mean, because he's at a point now where he gets it.
Right.
And as a parent, there's always going to be in the back of your mind, you're going to worry. But it's cool now when he goes by my house, I'm not worried. Is he going by to get something or find something or whatever? You're so comfortable, and so the trust is back.
Yes. Yes.
And it took a while.
Yes.
It takes a while.
That's a good point, because a lot of times somebody gets out of treatment or the detox and they're like, my family doesn't trust me. I'm like, no, they don't.
No kidding. Why would they? I'm like, good Lord.
Yeah. And I mean, I remember the first time my dad was like, I was like, I'm going to Publix. And he was like, will you get me a 6-pack? And I was like, I will. And this is like, a few years later, I'm like, how cool is this? My dad is trusting me to go buy him a 6-pack. And I was like, I didn't even, what's really cool about, being recovered is there's no thought about drinking. It's more of, I got excited because I was like, I haven't used my ID in so long. Like, do I have my license on me? And it was just a really cool experience.
It is. I had one like that right when I got out of phase 1 and I was in phase 2, and I would go swing by their house, when on weekends, or, go pick up something. And I remember I left a pair of shoes over there, and I was like, hey, I'm going to swing by the house and get it. He's like, okay, great. Me and your mom aren't there. They're on the back porch. And I was like, how dare you not let me in your house? Don't you know I've just been to treatment? It's been like 2.5 months. Like,
yeah, I'm perfect now.
Okay, I'll go get them, And then fast forward, I don't know how long, let's say another month or something, and I'm on the way to meet them at the house. And I was like, yeah, here's where I am. And he said, okay, you're about 20 minutes in front of us. Why don't you just go ahead and go in? I actually called him back and was like, you're not going to be there.
But you know what else? There was times he did that and he wouldn't go in until we got there, which I thought was pretty respectful. He would wait for us to get there.
Yeah.
And
those things are fun. When they happen.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
And it's hard too on the parent. We want to welcome our children into our homes. We want you to be there. We want you to come with your families. We want to do things. Our families were in each other's stuff all the time. It's mothers, fathers, grandparents. It didn't matter what was going on. They were there.
Yeah.
And
well, that's pretty neat. Any closing thoughts or comments you want to mention?
You want to go first?
Yeah, it's going to be quick. I was thinking about this on the whole way in. And as you were talking, you mentioned about like what it was like for me when he had to do the intervention and do those things. And like it's obviously gut wrenching. Your aesthetic to life is about to be taken from you. You have no idea what's about to happen. You got your dad in tears. You hadn't seen him cry since he lost his mother. Like, oh my gosh, the world is ending.
Yeah.
And for me, because I've been to treatment so many times, there's no chance this is going to work. And here we go again. But like I found an opportunity at a place where there was this incredible amount of love love was seen through the direction that the mentors were giving me, right? They were communicating with my parents. My parents were doing some family session work. And then like fast forward and I'm 3 years in and it's like, man, that was so quick. And, but us going in, it's like, you really want me to stay?
I know.
That long? Like, do you realize I could just do outpatient or something different?
Right.
And it'd be fine. But just to see it come all the way across and to see the family side and to have a relationship with my brother, have a relationship with he touched on my aunts and uncles and communicate. They call me. It's the craziest thing, Sarah. I'll either answer or text them. Previously, I wouldn't do either.
Nothing.
Yeah.
So it's really cool to watch. And now sitting here in this conversation and hear that side of things and to where it was in my heart and was just like devastation, treatment again. But this thing works. It's pretty unique.
That's amazing.
So my thought on closing is when all this was going down before he went to Impact, we're talking and he goes, I can't do treatment again. And I'm going, dude, I can't do treatment again.
Yeah.
I'm not even thought about this, not just financially, you're like, man, I'm about to throw the towel in. And I guess my advice to everybody or what comes from my heart is, like Jim Valvano said, don't give up. Don't ever give up. Try. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. please continue moving forward and hope it works. But, that would be my one thing to tell everybody. Because when he said that, I'm sitting there going, dude, me either. I'm just like kind of done with this crap, man.
Right.
Here we go, number 4 or 5, whatever it is. And you're just like, wow.
Yeah.
So that would be my advice. Don't give up. Just keep plugging away.
I love that. I love that because it's very dark and scary. And there is a light, a big light.
And it's refreshing what Adams and Chad brought to the table.
Mm-hmm.
Very refreshing. They're actually preparing Josh for life.
Yeah.
They're not just getting him sober.
Right.
They're getting him sober and preparing him for life. And that's what the people that come here need to know.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they need to know.
Yes. Well, thank you.
Thank you
guys so
It was pretty
much.
cool.
This was fun.
Yes, it was
liked
great. All right. Well, thank you guys for tuning in to another episode. I hope today's conversation has inspired you, opened your mind, maybe even your heart a little bit. But remember, you're not alone. If you know someone that could benefit from this, share the episode with them. Also, follow us on social and don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll have all the links below in the description. But until then, keep making an impact. Bye, y'all.